All right, so 4.2, we're going to perform operations with polynomials. Operations meaning we're going to add, subtract, multiply, and divide them. So when we start looking at some of these examples, you may think that they look familiar because we did this in one of the pre-chapter stuff in the beginning of the year. So this is kind of going to be kind of like a review for us because we've already done it, but it's just going to be like the Algebra 2 stuff of it. So adding and subtracting polynomials, recall that the set of integers is closed under addition and subtraction because every sum or difference results in an integer. To add or subtract polynomials, you add or subtract the coefficients of like terms. Because adding or subtracting polynomials results in a polynomial, the set of the polynomials is closed under addition or subtraction. So we are adding the coefficients of like terms. If I had 2x squared plus 4x squared, what would that be? 6x squared. Perfect. The variable part stays the same. What if I had 2x squared plus x? Can't add, because they're not like terms. So we can only add like terms. Alright, so there's kind of two different methods that we can do when adding. You can add them in a vertical format, so you can line them up on top of each other and add your like terms together, or horizontal. I think we're usually used to horizontal, but I'll show you what vertical looks like just in case that you like adding them like that better. So for A, I have 3x cubed plus 2x squared minus x minus 7. I'm adding that to x cubed minus 10x squared. I'm going to leave a space because I don't have an x term. The next one is the constant, so I'm going to say plus 8. So I want to make sure that my like terms are in line with each other. So sometimes you might have to leave a gap if you don't have like terms. So now we're just going to add each column together. So I have 3x cubed plus x cubed. What's the coefficient in front of the x cubed? 1. Awesome. So what's 3 plus 1? So this would be 4x cubed. Next we have 2x squared minus 10x squared. What's 2 minus 10? Negative 8x squared. Then we just have minus x, and what's negative 7 plus 8? 1. Yep. So this would be our answer. For B, when you add them in a horizontal format, we can just say plus, and we just add our like terms together. So I'm going to start with 9y cubed. Do I have another y cubed? Nope. So 9y cubed. Next, we have 3y squared minus 5y squared. So it's 3 minus 5. Negative 2y squared. Then we have negative 2y plus y. So what's negative 2 plus 1? Negative 1y, or we would just say negative y. And then lastly, 1 minus 4? Negative 3. Perfect. Any questions here? Alright, for the next page, we're finding the sum or difference. So in number 1, we are adding. Be super careful. A lot of people look at these when they're in parentheses and they always just want to try to FOIL. There's a plus sign in the middle. That means that we are adding. We just combine our like terms together. So we have 2x squared plus 7x squared, which would be what? 9x squared. Then we can move on to the x's. We have minus 6x minus x. Negative 7x, and then 5 minus 9, negative 4. When subtracting, what do we need to do first? Distribute the negative to everything behind it. So we have minus 5t cubed. This would turn into plus t squared and minus 17. So all the signs behind that minus that we're distributing just get flipped. So now let's combine our like terms. 3t cubed minus 5t cubed would be what? Negative 2t cubed. 8t squared plus t squared. Awesome. It'd be like 8 plus 1, so that would be 9t squared. Do I have any like terms with the t? Nope, so it'd just be minus t. And then negative 4 minus 17, negative 21. Awesome. All right, next we're going to be multiplying polynomials. So again, we can multiply in a vertical or horizontal format. I think horizontal is what we're used to, so I'm going to stick to the horizontal format. It's just like foiling, but if you have 3 terms, you just have to make sure everything in the first set of parentheses gets multiplied to everything in the second. So for A, we have negative x squared plus 2x plus 4 times x minus 3. So again, this is just like foiling. We just have to make sure everything in our first set gets multiplied to everything in the second. So let's start with negative x squared. What's negative x squared times x? Awesome. Negative x to the third power. What's negative x squared times negative 3? So it'd be positive, because it's a negative times a negative, so positive 3x squared. Now let's move on to the 2x. What's 2x times x? 2x squared. What's 2x times negative 3? Negative 6x. Then we can move on to the 4. What's 4 times x? 4x. And 4 times negative 3? Negative 12. What do you think we need to do next? Combine like terms. So we're going to start with our negative x cubed. Then we have 3x squared plus 2x squared. 5x squared. And then 6x plus 4x. Minus 2x. Minus 12. Awesome. All right, let's do B. So for B, we have y plus 5 times 3y squared minus 2y plus 2. So we just have to make sure everything in our first parentheses gets multiplied to everything in the second. So starting with the y. Wait, what is y times 3y squared? 3y to the third power. What is y times negative 2y? Negative 2y squared. And y times 2? 2y. Now we're going to move on to 5. What's 5 times 3y squared? 15y squared. 5 times negative 2y? Negative 10y. And 5 times 2? 10. Now we combine like terms when Hans comes back. So we start with 3y cubed. What would come next?
It's the minus 2y and the plus 15y.
So what's negative 2y plus 15y?
13y squared.
13y squared.
Minus 8y.
Awesome. 2y minus 10y would be minus 8y. And then plus 10. Any questions here? Just be super careful when multiplying. Just a lot of little steps here. Don't rush it. Just take your time in multiplying it out. All right, example 4. We're multiplying 3 binomials. So I have x minus 1 times x plus 4 times x plus 5. So in multiplying 3 binomials, we want to multiply 2 of them together at a time, and then we'll multiply the third one. So we can't multiply all 3 together at once. We're just going to multiply 2 together, and then we'll multiply the third. So starting with the first 2. Again, you could start with any 2 that you want. Just multiply 2 of them together, then the third one to it. So we're going to FOIL out the first 2. So what is x times x? X squared. What's x times 4? 4x. Negative 1 times x. And then negative 1 times 4. Negative 4. What could I do next? Let's combine like terms just to make this a little bit more simplified so it's easier when we multiply the third one to it. So I have x squared plus 3x minus 4. And then we're multiplying that times x plus 5, so the third one. Now again, we have to make sure every term in the first set gets multiplied to every term in the second. So what's x squared times x? X cubed. What's x squared times 5? 5x squared. Now we can move on to the 3x. What's 3x times x? 3x squared. What's 3x times 5? 15x. And then what's negative 4 times x? Negative 4x. And negative 4 times 5? Negative 20. Andrew, what do we do next?
Combine like terms.
Combine like terms. So we have x cubed.
8x squared.
Awesome. 8x squared.
11x and negative 20.
11x minus 20. Awesome. We're going to start with the 4x squared, and that gets multiplied to both things in the second parentheses. So what's 4x squared times 2x? 8x to the third power. What's 4x squared times 1? 4x squared. Perfect. Then let's move on to x. What is x times 2x? 2x squared. Then x times 1, x. And then we can move on to negative 5. Negative 5 times 2x. Negative 10x. And negative 5 times 1, negative 5. What do we do next? Combine like terms. We start with 8x cubed. Then we can add our x squareds. What's 4x squared plus 2x squared? 6x squared. What's x minus 10x? Negative 9x and then minus 5. Any questions? Let's do 5 right below it. So for 5, we have 3 binomials. What do I have to do first? Multiply 2 of them together first. So I'm just going to stick with the first 2 and multiply these 2 together. So we get m times m, m to the second power, m times negative 1, negative m, negative 2 times m, negative 2m, and negative 2 times negative 1, positive 2. Perfect. What should I do next? Combine like terms. We get m squared minus 3m plus 2. What do we do next? Multiply the third one. So we have m plus 3. Now we just multiply this out. So starting with the first, we have m squared times m to the third power, m squared times 3, 3m squared. Then negative 3m times m, negative 3m squared. Negative 3m times 3, negative 9m. 2 times m, 2m, and 2 times 3, 6. Lastly, what do? Combine like terms. So m to the third power. What is 3m squared minus 3m squared? They cancel it out, 0. Next we have negative 9m plus 2m, negative 7m, and then plus 6. All right, let's do 4. So we're going to start with y. What is y times 5y squared? 5y cubed. Y times 3y? 3y squared. And y times negative 1? Negative y. Next, we move on to negative 2. Negative 2 times 5y squared? Negative 10y squared. Negative 2 times 3y? Negative 6y. And negative 2 times negative 1? Positive 2. Combine our like terms. We're going to start with 5y cubed. What would go next? So 3y squared minus 10y squared would be what? Negative 7y squared. Then negative y minus 6y, negative 7y, and lastly plus 2. Any questions there? How do I multiply number 6? We're in a FOIL. So we have 3t times 3t, 9t squared. We have 3t times 2, 6t. Negative 2 times 3t, negative 6t. And negative 2 times 2, negative 4. So what happens to the 6t's in the middle? They cancel. So we're left with 9t squared minus 4. We could also, if you notice here that this is conjugates, they're the same, but the signs in the middle are different. You can use your conjugate shortcut. So that's the a squared minus b squared. So you could do your conjugate shortcut, but you could always just FOIL if you don't remember the shortcut.